The line at Ashfall broke a little after the third bombardment, and I remember thinking, with the flat clarity you only get when you are too tired to be afraid, that no one had told the ground it was supposed to hold. We had been dug into the redoubt for 11 days. The Yevanar called it Ashfall because of the gray that came down off the ridgeline when the wind turned, fine as flour, and it got into everything, your teeth, your wound packs, the actions of your rifles. By the 11th day I had stopped tasting my rations and started tasting the ash, and the men and women I patched had stopped looking at me like a medic and started looking at me like a door they hoped led somewhere else. I was the only human in the redoubt. There were 3,000 Yevanar in one of me, a coalition field medic seconded from a hospital ship that was, by then, a long way up and a long way gone. I had come down with the second wave to teach their combat surgeons a trick or two about human trauma protocols and to learn in exchange how their bodies broke and mended, which was not so different from ours as you might think. Blood is blood. Fear smells the same across 100 species. That was the thing nobody had put in the briefing, and it was the only thing that turned out to matter. When the line broke, it broke the way a dam breaks, not all at once but at a single seam and then everywhere. The eastern wall went, and the Koreth came through the gap in that low, folding way they moved, more water than soldiers, and the order to fall back came down the channels in the clipped double-tone the Yevanar used for retreat, and then the channels went to noise, and then the channels went to nothing. I lost my unit in the smoke. That is the honest and unheroic truth of it. One moment I had a hand on the shoulder plate of a Yevanar sergeant named Osk, who had let me set his arm 2 days before, and had, in the way of soldiers, decided that made us something like friends. The next moment there was a concussion that lifted the floor and put it down again in a different place, and when the ash-cleared Osk was gone and so was the corridor, and I was alone in a part of the redoubt I did not know, with my kit bag on one shoulder and my ears ringing a single high note that would not stop. I should have run for the extraction fields. That was the standing order, human personnel to the fields, priority lift. The coalition did not leave its people. If I had done what I was told, I would have made the last shuttle and I would have gone up into the black and I would never have known her name. Instead I heard something under the ringing. A sound that was not the Koreth and was not the guns. A small sound, human in its smallness even though there was nothing human about it. The particular sound a body makes when it is trying very hard not to make any sound at all. I have spent my life going toward that sound. It is the only thing I have ever been good at, so I went. The command shelter was at the heart of the redoubt, a bunker sunk into the old stone, and it had taken a hit through the roof. Half of it had come down. The other half was a low black space full of tilted beams and the smell of scorched wiring, and in the back of it, propped against the base of a shattered pillar, was a Yevanar I had never seen and knew at once was not like the others. She was pale, a slate blue that in the emergency light looked almost like the underside of a wave, cool and deep. Her hair was dark, near black but green in it, the color of teal when it is nearly gone into the dark, and it had come loose from whatever binding it had been in and fell across a face that was doing the thing I had heard. Holding still, holding silent, holding on. Her eyes were the reflective kind, dark, with a faint ring of blue around the iris that caught the light when she turned toward me, and those eyes were the only part of her that moved fast. The rest of her was wrong in the way I knew before I even reached her. Her left leg was crushed below the knee. A beam had come down across it and been half lifted off, but the damage was done, the bone and the meat of it, and there was a slick of dark blood pooling into the ash around her that told me she had been here a while, alone in the dark, listening to her people leave. She wore no armor. That struck me even before I understood it. Everyone in that redoubt had been in plate for 11 days. She was in a long robe, dark, embroidered with a pale thread I could not read, torn now and soaked through, and around her neck was a collar of worked metal, blue-gray, older than anything else in that room. I did not know then what it meant. I know now. It meant she had been in the deep of the shelter for a reason, and it meant that when she fell, the ones who should have carried her had made a choice. Easy, I said. It is the first word I say to everyone. It works across species better than any translator because it is not really a word, it is a tone. Easy, I've got you. Her eyes found mine and held. She said something in the double-toned tongue, low, and my earpiece, still working, small mercy, turned it into words a half-second behind her mouth. You are the human, she said, not a question. There was blood in her voice, the wet edge of it, and under that something I could not place yet. The medic, das. Merk das, I said. I was already opening the kit, already reading the leg with my hands, already doing the cold arithmetic that is the worst part of the work. You know my name. I know every name in my redoubt, she said, and then her breath caught on the pain and she pressed her head back against the pillar, and I saw the tendon stand out in her throat, and she did not cry out. I have seen strong men cry out at less. She did not. My redoubt. I looked at the collar again. I looked at the robe, the thread, the fact of her, alone in the command shelter that only the highest would ever have reason to enter, and I understood a piece of it, and I said, because there was no time for anything but the truth, you're the queen. I was the queen, she said, until my leg would not hold me. Now I am a stone that used to be a queen, and stones are left where they fall. I did not understand that yet. I would. But there was no room in that moment for anything but the leg, so I said, not tonight, you're not, and I got to work. I will not walk you through the surgery, if you can call field triage in a collapsing bunker surgery. I will tell you that the leg could not be saved below the knee and that she knew it before I did, and that when I told her in the plainest words I had that I could not fix it, only keep it from killing her, she nodded once and said, do what the wound requires, in a voice so level it was worse than screaming. I gave her what I had against the pain, less than I wanted, more than was wise, and I worked. And she watched me work with those dark ringed eyes, and somewhere out in the ruin the Korath were sweeping the redoubt room by room, and I could hear them the way you hear weather coming, a pressure more than a noise. When it was done, when the bleeding was stopped and the stump was closed as well as ash and firelight would allow, I sat back on my heels and I was shaking, the way you shake after, and she was looking at me with an expression I had not earned and did not know what to do with. Why, she said, are you still here? I thought she meant the tactical question. Cut off in the retreat, I said. I lost my unit east side. I'll get us both to the fields when it's... No, her hand moved slow, weighted with the drug and the loss of blood, and closed around my wrist, and her grip was cold and stronger than it had any right to be. You do not understand what you are asking. Listen to me, human. My Kithrin, my sworn blades were here when the pillar fell. 12 of them, sworn to my body from the day I took the collar. And when they saw that my leg would not bear me, when they saw that I could not stand, they took up the regent's word and they left me where I lay. The earpiece gave me the words a half-second late, as always, so that her face finished each sentence before I heard the end of it, and I watched her face say the thing before I heard it. There was no self-pity in it. That is what undid me, sitting there in the ash with her blood drying on my hands. There was no self-pity. There was only the terrible flat acceptance of someone telling you a law of nature. Among my people, she said, the sovereign is the body of the realm. When the body can stand, the realm stands. When the body falls and cannot rise, she turned her head a small motion toward the dark where her people had gone. It is not a betrayal to leave it. It is custom. The collar passes to the one who can stand. My Kithrin did not break their oath tonight, Merk Das. They kept it. Their oath was to a queen who could stand. I am no longer that queen. So they are free of me, and I am a stone, and stones are left. That's the worst thing I've ever heard, I said. I did not mean to say it. It came out of me the way blood comes out of a wound under pressure before you can pack it. She looked at me then, and for the first time something moved in the flat acceptance, some current under the ice. It is the way of things, she said. It is not cruel, it is only true. It's cruel and true both, I said. Those aren't opposites. And I turned back to my kit because I could feel my throat closing, and I did not want a queen of a people I barely understood to see a coalition medic come apart over her. There was a silence. Outside, closer now, the folding sound of the Koreth moving through the wreck. I began, very quietly, to break down the shelter around us into something defensible, because that was a thing I could do with my hands while my chest was doing something I could not control. "You are still here," she said again behind me softer, "because you have not understood. So I will say it plainly so that you may leave with a clear conscience. You owe me nothing. You are not my blade. You are not even of my people. No custom binds you, and no god of yours will fault you. The fields are east. Go to them, human, live. There is no shame in it. There is no one left here to shame you." I stopped what I was doing. I turned around. She was watching me with those eyes, and I understood all at once that she was not testing me. She was giving me a gift, the only one she had left to give. She was handing me my life freely, the way you hand someone something because you would rather they had it than that it be lost in the fire. And I understood, too, that she expected me to take it, that every soul she had ever known would have taken it, that her own sworn blades had taken it, without malice, as a matter of law, that in the whole long history of her people no one had ever stayed. "Queen Saril," I said. I had learned her name from the earpiece register in the last hour, the way you learn a patient's name off a chart. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it, because I'm only going to say it once and then I'm going to be too busy to say it again." She waited. "I'm not leaving you," I said. "Not because I'm sworn to you. I'm not because there's a custom. Where I'm from we've got a custom too, and it runs the exact opposite direction, and it's the only thing about my people I'd stand up and be proud of in front of God. You don't leave the wounded. You don't leave anybody. Not because of who they are, because of who you'd have to become to do it." I heard my own voice shaking, and I let it shake. "I won't leave you, that's all. It's not a debt and it's not a mercy. It's just what a person does. Now save your strength, your majesty, because it's going to be a long night, and I need you alive to see the end of it." She did not answer for a long time. The reflective dark of her eyes had gone bright at the rims, the blue ring catching the emergency light, and a single line of wet ran down through the ash on her cheek, and she did not wipe it away, and neither did I. She was a queen. She would not want it wiped away. But her eyes stayed on mine the whole time, and there was a thing happening behind them that I had no word for then and have only one word for now, and the word is recognition, not of me, not yet, but of the shape of a world in which someone would say what I had just said and mean it, as if she were looking at a color she had been told did not exist. "No one," she said at last, very low, "has ever stayed." "I know," I said. "I heard, well, somebody has now." The Koreth found our corridor a little after what I judged to be midnight, though there was no sky to check it against. I had spent the hours between doing what I could. I had dragged the tilted beams into a rough barricade across the shelter's low doorway, leaving a firing gap I could see through, and a Yevnar could not squeeze past. I had run a check of what I had: my sidearm, 40 rounds, a Yevnar rifle I'd found under a dead officer with a half-charge in it, my kit, 3 field dressings, 2 liters of water, and the queen. I had moved her gently, and this was the part I want to tell you about, because it is the part I think about still. She could not lie flat. The wound wept when she did, and the drug had worn thin, and I had little left. And to lie a wounded thing on stone in the cold is to invite the cold to finish what the wound began. She needed to be up off the ground, propped, warm, held. So I built her a place. There was no couch in a war. There was no bed, no litter, no chair. There was a shattered command shelter and the wreck of a people's retreat, so I built her one out of it. I took the padded backing off the ruined command consoles, the thick shock foam they cushioned their instruments in, and I stripped the cloaks and the bedrolls off the 2 dead officers in the shelter. I asked their pardon out loud in the human way, which made her watch me strangely, and I built up a slope of it against the base of the sound pillar, layered and banked, and I lifted her into it so that she was half sitting, her ruined leg raised, her back supported, up off the stone at last. I wrapped her in the cloaks. I put the last of my own field blanket over her and tucked it under, the way you do for a child, though she was a queen, and I would not have insulted her by saying so. When I was done, she was warm and up and held, and she looked at the thing I had made, this absurd throne of wreckage and dead men's cloaks and instrument foam, in the black of a falling redoubt, and something crossed her face that was almost, God help us both, amusement. "You have made me a seat," she said. "Best I could do." "In the histories of my house," she said, "there are thrones of white stone and thrones of star iron, and a throne in the old Capitol, grown from a single living tree over 400 years. Her hand moved on the foam on the coarse dead man's cloak. "None of them," she said, "was ever built for me by a person who did not have to." I did not know what to say to that, so I said, "It'll hold you till morning," and I checked her dressing again, and I did not look at her face, because a man can only take so much in one night. That was when the Koreth came. I heard them in the corridor, that folding, watery sound, and under it the clicking, chittering register they used among themselves, which the earpiece did not translate, and which I was glad it did not. I killed the emergency light. I put myself in the firing gap of the barricade with the Yevnar rifle, and I put my body between the doorway and the queen, and I waited. I will not make the fight into more than it was. War is not a story. It is a series of very fast, very ugly problems, each of which you solve or do not. There were 4 of them in the first push, and I took 2 in the corridor's choke point before they understood there was fire coming from the dark shelter, and I took a 3rd as it came over the beams. The 4th got close enough that I used the sidearm, close enough that the ash on its carapace was on my sleeve after, and then the corridor was quiet again, and my ears were ringing the single high note once more, and my hands were doing their small, useless shake. Behind me in the dark, Sarah's voice steady, "You are hit." I had not felt it. That is the way of it. I put my hand to my side and it came away wet, and I laughed, a short, ugly sound because, of course. "It's nothing," I said, which is what medics say, and which is a lie so common it ought to be its own word. "Come here," she said. "Come into the light of your own lamp, Merk Das, and let me see it. You are not the only one in this room who has learned to close a wound." And that is how a queen of the Yevnar, one-legged and dying, dressed the wound in the side of a human medic, in the black of a falling redoubt, with hands that shook worse than mine but did not stop. It was a scratch, a carapace edge along the ribs, ugly and shallow. She packed it and bound it with a competence that surprised me, and when I said so she said, "I was a soldier before I was a sovereign. We are all soldiers first." That is the only oath that does not dissolve. And there was something bitter in it, and something that was reaching in the dark for its opposite. "You're Catherine," I said when she had finished, when we were sitting side by side in the low light with our backs to the pillar, and the corridor quiet and the long middle of the night ahead of us. "The ones who left, you don't hate them." "No," she said. "That is the hardest part for you to understand, I think. I do not hate them. Vessing, the regent, the one who spoke the word that freed them, Vessing is not a villain. He is a man doing what the law of my people permits and more requires. When I could not stand. The collar became his to protect. To carry me would be to leave the realm without a body while the Koreth pressed. By our law he chose rightly." Her jaw tightened. "By our law." "And by yours." She was quiet a long moment. "I have been the body of the realm since I was younger than I care to say," she said. "I have sent Catherine to die for the collar. I have left the wounded myself, Merk. On the retreat from the Vane crossings, I gave the word that left 300 of my own on the far bank, because to hold the bridge for them would have lost the crossing. I did not weep. It was the law, and the law was true, and I was the body of the realm, and the realm was more than 300 sons." Her voice did not break, but it thinned, like a wire pulled fine. "I told myself it was true, and it was true, and tonight I lay in the ash and I listened to my own blades take up the word and go, and I found that a thing can be true and still be the worst thing that has ever been done to you. You said that. Earlier, cruel and true both. I did not have those words in that order until you gave them to me. I did not say anything. Some things you do not answer. You just sit beside them in the dark so they are not said into an empty room. You should have left me, she said, by every law I have. And you did not by every law you have. And I have spent my whole life inside my law, certain it was the shape of the world, and now there is a human sitting in my ash who lived his whole life inside the opposite law, just as certain, and both of us breathing. She turned her head and looked at me, and the blue ring caught the light. One of our laws is wrong, Merk Das. I have been very sure my whole life which one. Tonight I am less sure. They're both trying to save people, I said. Yours saves the many. Mine saves the one in front of you. They're not enemies, they just— I searched for it, tired past cleverness. They just can't both be in the room at the same time. No, she said softly, they cannot. And tonight in this room there is only the one in front of you. She looked at her ruined leg at the throne of wreckage at me. I am the one in front of you. Yeah, I said, you are. We held the shelter through 2 more pushes that night. I will not walk you through them. The second cost me the last of the rifle's charge and left me on the sidearm and 11 rounds. The third came near to being the end of it, and there was a stretch of it, hand and knee in the ash with a Korath's weight on me and its edges seeking my throat, when I thought clearly and without fear that this was where it finished, and then the crack of a shot from behind me, and the weight went loose. Saril had my second sidearm, the one I'd set within her reach without quite admitting to myself why braced two-handed on the arm of her wreckage throne, and she had put a round through the thing's head over my shoulder, one-legged, half-dead, a queen who by her own law was a stone. The recoil had knocked her back into the cloaks, and she was gasping with the pain of it, but her eyes when they found mine were fierce and bright and entirely alive. I told you, she said through her teeth, soldier first. I sat down in the ash next to her wreckage throne, and I put my back against it, and I laughed until it turned into something else, and she reached down and put her cold hand on my head, on my hair, the way you would gentle a horse or a child or a soldier who has held a door too long, and neither of us said anything, and the corridor was quiet, and the ring in my ears was the only sound, and we waited for the dark to end. Why, she said much later, when the black outside the firing gap had gone the faintest degree less black. I asked you before and you gave me a speech. Give me the true answer now when we are too tired to lie. Why did you stay? I thought about it. I owed her the true one. When I was 19, I said, I was a coward. I ran off a line, left a man, he didn't make it. Nobody blamed me, there was no way to carry him, it was the smart call, everyone said so. I looked at the ash. Smart and true, they said. I've been a medic 30 years since, and I've figured out that I didn't become a medic to save the many. I became a medic so that there'd never again be a wounded thing in front of me that I turned my back on. It's not noble, Your Majesty. It's a debt to a dead man. I stay because I can't do the other thing anymore. I burned out the part that could. She was quiet then, so you carry a law that is a wound. Yeah, I said, I guess I do. Then we are the same, she said, for I carry a law that is a wound also, only mine wounds in the other direction. Her hand tightened once on my hair and then let go. Perhaps that is the only kind of law worth keeping, the kind that costs the one who keeps it. The dark outside, the gap went gray. They came at dawn, and for one bad moment I thought it was the last push, the one we would not hold, because I was down to 4 rounds and I could not have stopped a determined child. But the sound was wrong, not the folding Korath water sound. Boots, the hard, ordered march of Yevanar plate and voices in the double tone calling, searching, and the earpiece stuttered and gave me fragments. The shelter, the collar, recover the, and I understood before I understood, and I put down the sidearm and I put my hands where they could be seen and I said low to Saril, company's coming. Your people, and her face in the gray light, did a thing I will remember when I have forgotten my own name. She had been left for dead. She had made her peace with the ash, and now there were her people's boots in the corridor, and hope is a crueler thing than despair because it can be taken back, and I watched her not let herself have it, watched her hold her face still against it, a queen to the last, ready for it to be looters or the enemy or a dream. The first of them came over the barricade with a rifle up and stopped. He was young, an officer by his plate, a captain's marks on his shoulder, ash-gray and blood-marked and running on the same 11 days of no sleep as the rest of us. His name, I would learn, was Torin, and he had held the eastern extraction fields through the night with what was left of the coalition line, and at first light he had done the thing no one had ordered him to do. He had turned a relief column around and come back into the falling redoubt, against custom, against sense, to recover the body of a queen he had served and could not bear to leave unburied. He came over the barricade expecting a corpse. He found her sitting up in a throne of wreckage and dead men's cloaks, dressed and warm and breathing, a human medic on the ground beside her with 4 rounds and both hands open, and the bodies of a night's worth of Korath stacked in the choke point of the door. He froze. The rifle came down slowly. His mouth moved before any sound came out of it, and when it did the earpiece gave it to me a half-second late, so that again I watched a Yevnar face finish the words before I heard them. "You are alive," Torin said, and then louder turning, calling back down the corridor in a voice that cracked, "She lives, the queen lives." I will not pretend I understood all of what followed. There were things in it that belonged to their people and not to mine, old words, a gesture with the open hand pressed flat to the collarbone, a way the soldiers who crowded the doorway went to one knee that was not for me to read. But I understood the shape of it. I understood that a thing was happening that their law had not prepared them for. Their sovereign had fallen, and the collar should have passed, and the body of the realm should have been a stone left in the ash. And here she was, alive, because of a thing their law did not have a place for. And then the regent came. Vessing was older, heavy in his plate, and he came through the kneeling soldiers with the collar of the realm, a second collar, the successor's, already half lifted in his hands, because he had come to claim it over her body, and the words in his mouth were the formal words of succession, and he got 3 of them out before he saw her eyes on him and the words died. The shelter went very quiet. I have thought a great deal since about what Sarah might have done in that quiet. She was within her rights by any law, human or Yevnar, to have him taken. He had spoken the word that stripped her of her blades. He had come to take her collar over her corpse. She had the boots and the rifles of a loyal officer at her back, and a witness to all of it. She did none of that. She was a better sovereign than her own law deserved. "Vessing," she said. Her voice was thin with blood and the long night, but it filled the low room. "You kept the law. When I could not stand, you freed my blades and you took up the collar. And by the law of our house you did rightly, and I will not have you touched for it. Hear me, you did rightly." Vessing's heavy face worked. He had come expecting a corpse or a claim. He had not come expecting to be forgiven, and forgiveness is harder to stand under than a blade. "But hear this also," Sarah said, and now her eyes moved from Vessing slowly, along the kneeling soldiers, along the young Captain Torin who had turned a column around against custom, and came at last to me, sitting in the ash with my empty hands. "Our law is that the sovereign is the body of the realm, and when the body falls it is left, and this is true, and I have lived inside it all my life. But last night I lay in this ash and I learned the cost of it from the far side, and I learned it from a person who is not of our blood and owed us nothing and carried no collar and was bound by no oath of ours." She lifted her hand, the effort of it showed, and she pointed, not with a queen's distant gesture but plainly, the way you point at a person you want everyone in the room to look at. This human stayed. When my own sworn blades kept the law and left, this human, who had every law of his own in mind to permit his going, stayed in the dark and held the door and built me a seat out of the wreck of our retreat and put his own body between me and the enemy and would not leave. There is no place in our law for what he did, so we will make one. She let that sit in the room. No one moved. "Torin," she said, You turned a column around to bring home a body against custom. Why? The young captain's throat worked. Because leaving you unburied in the ash was a thing I could not carry, my queen, he said. The law said the collar had passed and there was nothing there but a stone, but I found I did not believe the law. I am sorry. Do not be sorry, Sarah said, and her voice was gentle now and terrible in its gentleness. You are the second person in one night to break my people's law by staying, and both of you have shamed a law I have kept my whole life without once asking whether it deserved keeping. There is no shame in you, Torin. The shame is mine, and it is Vesing's, and it is every sovereign's who ever gave the word to leave the wounded and told themselves it was only true. She closed her eyes a moment. When she opened them, they were wet at the rims, the blue ring catching the dawn coming gray through the broken roof, and she did not let the tears fall and she did not wipe them, and she looked at me. Merk das, she said, come here. I got up. My side hurt and my hands shook and I was so tired the room swam, but I got up, and I came and stood in front of the wreckage throne I had built her, and the kneeling soldiers and the regent and the young captain all watched, and I did not know the custom and I did not care, because I have never in my life stood on custom, and I stood in front of her the way one tired person stands in front of another. I cannot give you a collar, she said. You are not of our blood and you would not want it and it would mean nothing to your people. I cannot give you rank in a house that is not yours. I have almost nothing left to give. I have a ruined leg and a shamed law and a realm that will spend a long time learning what I learned in one night. Her hand came up and rested light on my forearm, over the dried blood, the way it had rested on my head in the dark. But I can give you the truth in front of my people, so that it is a thing that was said and cannot be unsaid. So hear it, all of you, and carry it, and let it be the first stone of the new law. She looked at me, only at me. When I fell, she said, and could not stand, and by every law of every people in that room I should have been left, one person in the whole turning of the world did not leave me. And he was not my blade, and he was not my blood, and he was not even of my kind. He was a stranger with tired hands who had every reason to go and stayed anyway, because his law is that you do not turn your back on the wounded thing in front of you, whoever it is, whatever it costs. I have kept the wrong law all my life. I will keep his now. Her fingers tightened on my arm. You stayed, she said. No one ever stays, you stayed. I will not forget it, and I will not let them forget it, and when they build the histories of what my house became after Ashfall, they will begin with a human who built a queen a seat out of the ruin and sat beside her in the dark so that she would not die alone. That is the throne I will be remembered for. Not the white stone, not the living tree, this one. She struck the arm of the wreckage throne once with the flat of her hand. The one a person built for me who did not have to. There is not much more to tell. They carried her out at full light, carried her, a wounded sovereign, on a litter through the falling ruin, in flat defiance of the law that said she should be left, and no one, not even Vesing, said a word against it. I walked beside the litter with my empty sidearm holstered and my kit on my shoulder, and she kept her hand on the rail where I could reach it, and I reached it, and the young Captain Torin walked on the other side and looked at me now, and then the way soldiers look at each other when a thing has passed between them that will not need words for the rest of their lives. At the extraction fields there was a coalition shuttle holding past all scents, past all orders, one bird still down because a medic named Das had not made the manifest and the pilot had refused to lift without him. And there is a whole other story in that, in the human law that runs the opposite direction. But it is the same law in the end, the only one I have ever believed in. You do not leave anybody. I went up with her in the end, and I set the leg proper in a real bay with real light, and I have visited the Yevanar since more than once, and the law has begun slowly, the way laws do, to change. They will not leave the wounded now, not the many and not the one. It is a harder way to run a realm. It costs the ones who keep it. She told me once, on one of my visits, in the new capital with its new small throne kept plain and undecorated at her own order, that the cost was the point, that a law that costs nothing is not a law but only a convenience. But I remember her best from that night in the ash before any of it. I remember her eyes finding mine in the emergency light, when I said the thing I would only say once, that I would not leave her, that it was not a debt and not a mercy, that it was only what a person does. I remember the flat acceptance breaking just slightly at the rims. I remember her saying, so low I almost missed it under the ringing in my ears, "No one has ever stayed." "Somebody has now," I told her. And I did.